All right, today we're doing 5/8 point slope form. I love this equation. It is really helpful. It's kind of like the name says, when you know a point on a line and the slope of a line. So where yesterday, I wouldn't write this, but yesterday we were doing y equals mx plus b. And if you knew the slope and you knew the y-intercept or the starting amount, you could plug the numbers in. The equation was easy and awesome. This new one is the exact same way. If you know the point, you know the slope, you're golden. All right, so enough intro. Let's get into what is this thing. So the equation looks worse than it is. We have y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. So it looks like a beast, but it's really not that bad when you unpack it, and we will be doing that. So first of all, just like in our slope-intercept form, this m is going to be the slope. And essentially, it's the number that we multiply our x variable by. But you probably noticed, hopefully not with fear and trepidation, that we have two x's and two y's in there. Well, just kind of like when we had our slope equation, we'd label a point x1 comma y1 and x2 comma y2. The point is going to be this x value is the x value of my point. This right there is going to be the y value of my point. So that's probably a little bit confusing at this point, but our examples are totally going to help with that. So our slope is m. And then the point is going to be this right there, the x1 comma y1. All right, so if we go through and do this, I'm going to ask you to know this equation from memory, those people in my class. So as you go through and do these, until you get good, I'd encourage you, first step, just write that thing down. So actually, I'll scroll down a little bit so you can still kind of see it. But first step, I encourage you to write y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. And our question is saying, write an equation for a line through 3, 2 with a slope of 4. All right, so we can do that. So just like normal, our equations are going to have an x and a y. So I'm going to just copy in my y and my equals, my parentheses, and my x. Not the x1 and y1, though. All right, now we can just fill in the last couple things. Well, our slope is always the letter m. So 4 goes into the spot where that m is. So I'm going to put a 4 right there below the m. And then my point is that 3, 2. Well, just like I wrote above, we write a x1 comma y1 up above that 3, 2. Well, you can see, all right, so my x1 is just the positive 3 right there. So I have a x minus my x1. So x minus positive 3. y1 is going to be 2. So I could put a 2 right below that y1, and then I have a y minus 2. That's the equation. Y minus 2 equals 4, parentheses x minus 3. And you don't have to do distributive or simplify. This is a legitimate line equation, exactly how it's written, just like that. You can write that, smile, and be done. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you didn't notice it already, what's kind of weird about this one is that I have x minus 3 here, but it's a positive 3. And I have a y minus 2, and it's a positive 2. So in the equation, the sign in the equation is always going to be the opposite of the sign positive, negative for our point. So you kind of have to be used to that. That's something that throws people a curveball. Let's go down and do example 2. In example 2, you kind of have that sort of thing coming up again. So again, since I'm going to ask you to know it from memory, I'd encourage you until you get good at this, quick write down the equation. So y minus y1 equals m times parentheses x minus x1 parentheses. All right, and I'm going to start just by putting in the point and the slope. So I'm going to start with my slope. All right, my slope here is a negative 8, so that goes in for m. So I'm going to write a negative 8 right there. And my point is x1, y1, so I'm going to say x1 and y1. So x1 is a negative 2. So I put a negative 2 there for x1. And I'm going to fill the rest in a second. So I have x minus that negative 2. If you leave your answer like this, it's going to get marked down because it's not simplified. So you should say minus a negative. That's the exact same thing as a positive. You could look at it as though that negative there gets swung around on top of the minus. So x plus 2 is the simplified version. All right, now I have my y1 as a 7, so I could put a positive 7 in for y1, then copy down the y minus that. So again, we don't have to simplify. That right there is the equation, and I just want to point out, quick a sec, that when I have this positive 2 here for the x, it's really a negative 2 for the point. I have a minus 7 here for the y, it's really a positive y. The other thing that people mess up, not just the plus and minus there, is they're used to seeing x in front and y second, so a lot of times people will call this the x value and this the y value. But nope, the y value is paired with y, the x value is paired with x. All right, so moving on. Let's say we want to graph something, or we want to get information like what's the point, what's the slope. There's really 2 tips that I think are going to make life a little bit easier for you. The first one is kind of what we've been doing on the last couple of questions. I'd encourage you to write the equation. That's what I was doing in black up above, the y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. Above or below. So take the equation that the book gives you. If you write that general equation up above it, then it's real easy to pick out, okay, m is right here, x1's right here, y1's right there. Do that until you get good at it. The second thing, going back, and I wouldn't write this in your notes, but we did y equals mx plus b. So maybe like y equals 2/3 x plus 4. That to graph that, we started here and said, okay, I'm going to put a dot on the y-intercept, and I'm going to use the slope to find more points. We can do that same sort of thing here, but instead if we want to graph it, so to graph, I'm going to do graph colon, put a dot on the point. So instead of doing the y-intercept, you'd say, okay, what's x1, y1? Take that point, put a dot there, and then use slope to find points. So find more points. Once you find the points, put a line through it. So that's what we're going to do in the next couple examples. Flying right along here. Okay, so find a point in the slope in y plus 7 equals that. So I'm going to do that first tip. It's a whole lot easier if you copy this down. Y minus y1 equals m, parentheses, x minus x1. And we know the slope is just going to be m. So slope, or you could write just m equals if you want to save time, but we can just line this sucker up. So we have slope has to be 8. So slope is going to be a positive 8. And then my point, colon, now I'm going to have a set of parentheses, so x and y there. So x1, if I look at this, x1 is kind of by this 5 right there. But if you notice, I have an x plus 5 up above and an x minus x1 down below. Do you agree plus 5 is the exact same as x minus a negative 5? So my x1 is going to be a negative 5. My y1 is going to be similar, that I have this y plus 7, the same as y minus a negative 7. So my point is going to be negative 5, comma, negative 7. So you could go through and do the x minus the negative. You could do that, or you could just tell yourself, hey, math is sometimes screwy. If it's a plus 5, it's really a negative 5. If it's a plus 7, it's really a negative 7. That's probably not the way I should encourage you to do it, but it'll work. Jumping down to example 4. I'm going to quick write that out again. So y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. We have that. So first we want our point. So x1 is going to be a positive 3 because it's a negative 3. It's always the opposite there. My y value, I have a y plus 1, which means that's going to be y minus a negative 1. So negative 1 there. All right, so that's our point. So first thing we can do is put a dot on that point. So I start at the origin. Positive 3 takes me there. Negative 1 gets me to there. So I'm over 3, down 1. Next step then, my slope is going to be a positive 2. Well, slope is rise over run. So if we have a slope of 2, that's the same as 2 over 1. So I can say, all right, rise is going to be a positive 2, so that takes me up 2. A run is a positive 1, so I go 1 to the right, and I can just keep doing that over and over. So put a dot there, up 2 over 1, dot, up 2 over 1, do a dot, up 2 over 1. And let me put those in quick a second. So I'm there, 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 and there. You could do that same thing, but look at this as though you have a negative 2 over a negative 1, because that also gives me just a positive 2. And when I do that, essentially you're just doing this backwards, down 2, left 1. So -2 for rise, -1 for slope. So you could put dots there and there and there. So I get a few more dots. And once you have a bunch of dots, you can accurately draw a line. So I'm going to take my ruler and put a ruler on top of that. And then make sure you have a nice line that goes through those points all the way to the end of the graph. Okay, so we're getting close. There's just a lot in this section, okay, so writing equations from story problems or from 2 points. So we called this the point-slope equation. All of our equations, we have a point, we have the slope. So if we have some story problems, you're going to have a point and a slope right there. But some of them you're going to have 2 points. If you have the 2 points, you can pick, I want this to be my x1, y1, or you could have this be your x1, y1. Doesn't matter which one you pick, so there's a couple different possible answers. But the other thing you need to do is find the slope. But if we have 2 points, we can do that. So I'll jump down here. So Roman numeral 4, I'm going to say find the slope. Find slope. And put point and slope in the equation. And sometimes this whole find the slope, sometimes they give you a point and a slope, so then you don't have to bother with it. But, all right, so first thing, I'm maybe going to do my y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. And we have to fill in something for the slope, and then x1 and y1. So I'm maybe going to just start with my x1 and y1, and I'm going to pick this one here. So I'm going to say 2 is my x1, 9 is my y1. So when I do that, I'm going to have a x minus a positive 2, and then I have a y minus y1, which is y minus 9. So that's going to be one equation. Now all we need to do is put in the slope. All right, to find the slope, slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So maybe I'll label this x2, y2. So this is going back to a couple sections ago. And I have a -3 minus 9 all over 5 minus 2. So that gives me a -12 over 3, which comes out to be a -4. So once I have that, I can put it in there and be done. If you wanted to go with the other equation, this would be the other equation that would work. It'd be y minus a -3, so y plus 3. Slope is still -4. And then x minus the x value, so x minus 5. So either one of those would work for answers for this one here. All right, we're getting close. Flying down a little bit further. So this should be our last page here. Yep, there's the learning goals at the end. This one's a little bit easier because we don't have to calculate the slope. So y minus y1, wrote this question in honor of my wife, who's a librarian, and our house sometimes kind of looks like a library. We have books and bookcases everywhere. Okay, so we want to take this thing here. We need to figure out like what's our point and what's our slope. So if we're looking at this here, Michelle has 85 books at age 10. If she gets 21 new books each year, I don't know, this probably isn't accurate. Write an equation showing her number of books, y, in x years. Okay, so if x is the number of years, we could take our point, and this is going to be number of years for x, so years, and books is going to be y. So of the 3 numbers in there, there has to be a pair, a certain number of books at a certain year. And if we look, okay, at age 10, she has 85 books, so 85. So that right there, my friends, is x1 and y1. So I can fill in, all right, I have x minus x1, so x minus 10. Now on the other side, I have y minus y1, so y minus 85. And the 21 should be the slope, just kind of by process of elimination, but we're looking at change in y over change in x for slope. So we're looking at like books per division, years. And sure enough, 21 new books each year. So then we could take that 21, and that is our slope. So y minus 85 equals 21, x minus 10. That's that one. Very last thing, almost done. This one, we finally don't have to write an equation. We can just do something with it. And this confuses some people, so I figured I better put it in the notes. When she gets married at 28. Well, 28, you have to say, well, is that years or is that books? Well, she gets married. Hopefully not when she has 28 books. That'd be less than 10. That's just creepy. Okay, moving on. So 28 is going to be the age, which up here then we have, okay, so age is my x value. So we know we have to either put it in for x or for y, because those are our only variables, but because age is going to be the independent, is going to be the x value, we just put 28 in right there. So I'm going to copy that same equation. So y minus 85 equals 21, but instead of x, I'm going to put in a 28 minus 10. And you could take that right-hand side. I'm going to leave the minus 85 over here for a second. I'm going to simplify all that on the right-hand side. Some people will put that into a calculator and just punch it in all at once. That would totally work. I'm just going to do it in a couple steps real quick and say, all right, I have 21 times 28 minus 10 I have to do first. So that gives me an 18. And once I'm there, I can say, all right, 21 times 18 is 378. So y minus 85 equals 378. And once we're there, well, to get y by itself, I just add 85 to both sides. So in theory, y then would be 463 books. And this is probably not the accurate calculation. I don't think she had that many when we got married. Hopefully not, because we lived in a third-floor apartment for 1 year, so I carried all of her books up 32 steps, and then a year later carried them all down 32 steps. But anyways, that's at least how you would come up with finding y when x is 28 for that equation. That's it. Let me know if you have questions, and yeah, I think you're going to like it. Once you get used to it, it's sweet.